Wonderful. Okay, y'all. Well, again, welcome to our information session for this summer 2026. We are very excited to be here to tell you a little bit more about our psychology PhD program here at UC Berkeley. Okay, so a little bit of an agenda for all of you. We're going to first look into is a PhD the right fit for me? Then we're going to go straight into our psychology PhD program itself. And then we're going to talk a little bit about applying to our program, being a competitive candidate. And then we're going to leave a lot of time for Q&A at the very end. And so please leave your questions for the end. Um, we can accept questions through the chat, or you can go ahead and just unmute, raise your hand. But we're going to save that for the very end. We have maybe like 15 to 20 minutes of information to go through first. But after the session, if you do have questions and you are like me and you just forget to ask in the moment, you can always email psychgradadmissions@berkeley.edu. This summer, either myself or Sabana will definitely help you out and answer. Okay, so, oh, and if I'm looking this way, it's because I'm looking at my other screen so I can look at my notes. So please pardon for that. But first, the big question is, um, well, not a question, statement. I want to go to grad school in psychology, right? So, you got to start asking yourself, okay, exactly why. If it's to do therapy, there are so many options for you on this left side. You can do a PsyD, you can do a master's program like a marriage and family therapy master's. You can also do an LCDC program certification, which it notes here that's the quickest route to becoming a therapist. There are other MA programs that you can also get into, or consider doing a master's in educational psychology as well. Now, if you're someone that is interested in research as well as teaching, there's definitely PhDs in many areas that are non-clinical. And some things to consider are other areas of psychology, that would include health psychology, cognitive, well, we have a cognitive neuroscience program in our PhD, but there's also industrial organizational psychology. So that's something to consider. And then a PhD really is for those that do want to do research and teach, and sometimes folks also want to do therapy. So there is the PhD in clinical psychology, or more so, we have the clinical science research area within our PhD program specifically. We do have a pretty competitive program. We do have a 1 to 2% acceptance rate within clinical science itself. Um, and then, uh, just so that we finish this little grid here, other things to consider if you are interested in research, teaching, and therapy is considering an educational doctorate or EDD, or a PhD in counseling or educational psychology. And then we also have right here at the very bottom, there are different focuses for special populations. So sometimes folks want to specialize in working with um, gerontology, forensics. They want to specifically work with veterans, or they want to work with clients that have specific disorders. So this right here is actually found on our website and is a pretty good resource for folks that are kind of still deciding what they want to do in terms of graduate school. And I'm going to pass it off to Sabana, who I'm now going to spotlight, who's going to talk about career trajectory.
Perfect. Thank you, Kai. So, yeah, career trajectories. There might be several different reasons why you're considering a PhD in psychology. One might be that you're considering a career in research. So, it'd be important for you to look for a program such as ours that will emphasize becoming a good scientist and a strong researcher. So, these programs will focus on providing you with the necessary laboratory experience and field experience that you need to become a strong researcher. Some of you might be interested in a career in teaching. So, for example, becoming a professor. So, in our program, teaching is foundational and applicable to PhD students in all areas of psychology. So, whether you're a clinical student or a developmental student like myself, you'll be teaching in some capacity. Most folks will teach as a graduate student instructor or a GSI. This is more commonly known as a teaching assistant, so helping a professor facilitate a course here at Berkeley. You'll also probably mentor undergraduate students at some point. So, no matter what, you'll gain experience in teaching, and that'll help prepare you for a career in academia if that's what you'd like to do. Some of our students also end up working in industry at places like Google, Facebook, and also other places like museums and nonprofits. And industries, companies, they really appreciate folks with PhDs because we do have really strong analytical skills, and all these companies are collecting our data and they need ways to analyze it. So that's something that this program prepares you for. And you'll also be somebody who can come up with new ideas and test those ideas. And so that's also really helpful for companies when they're considering different, advertising options or ideas for their people. And then lastly, you might also be considering a career in therapy. So, like Kai mentioned, for folks who are interested in therapy, the clinical area, the clinical science area at UC Berkeley is the program that you would probably be most interested in. It's going to focus on giving you research experience, but also the clinical experience that you need in order to do therapy. So, these are all the different career options that you might be thinking about, and these might be the reasons why you're considering a PhD in psychology in the first place. So going on to just an overview of the psychology PhD program. So UC Berkeley Psychology PhD program, it has a STEM designation, and it was recently named as of 2025 the #1 graduate psychology program in the United States, according to the US World and News Report. So that's pretty exciting. It also means that our program is pretty competitive. So on average, we receive about 750 to 1,000 applications per cycle, with 4 to 5% of those folks receiving an interview and 2 to 3% of them actually getting admitted. So it is quite competitive. And like Kai mentioned earlier, we get the most applicants for the clinical science area. So those are folks who are interested in a career in therapy. And the clinical science area gets a acceptance rate of less than 2%. So very, very competitive. However, if you are admitted, all students admitted into the program receive 5 years or 10 semesters of guaranteed funding. That's typically through teaching, so as a graduate student instructor, or sometimes you'll receive fellowships or grants that will cover you so that you can focus on research for a semester, for a year, for however long that funds you for. So you're guaranteed funding for those 5 years, which is really nice. And that also covers tuition. So you don't have to pay tuition fees and you also get paid a salary. So very nice.
Yeah. And Savannah, before you move on to the next slide, something that I wanted to really quickly mention. We used to have a slide with all of our 6 research areas. I probably accidentally
Mm.
deleted it. I'm so sorry. But we have more information about all 6 research areas on psychology.berkeley.edu's website. And I just quickly want to name what all 6 of them are for those that are not aware. So, our first is behaviors and systems neuroscience. We have cognitive neuroscience as well. We have cognition. We have developmental, which is the area that Sabana is in. We have clinical science, which we've mentioned quite a lot. And then we also have social personality. So now we can go on and talk about more things.
Perfect. Thank you, Kai. Okay. So thinking about what does it look like to do a PhD in psychology at Berkeley? Here we have a nice timeline of what this sort of looks like. And of course, it varies a little bit for each person, but this is generally what 5 to 6 years of a PhD would look like for you. And on average, it takes folks about 5 to 6 years. So that's how we broke it up here. So starting at year one, you'll mostly be focused on completing course requirements. So this includes courses like research methods and statistics, certain seminars that you have to take. And so you'll be focused on that during your first year. You'll also be enrolled in Research 299. That's the course that provides you course credit for the research that you're doing in your primary lab. So you'll be enrolled in Research 299 every single year, as you see throughout these blocks. Another thing you'll be doing during your first year is probably grant writing and applying to fellowships. So a lot of folks, for example, will apply to the NSF during their first year, so that might be something you do. And, Applying to these funds allows you to do more research because you have the money for it, and sometimes it can be used to replace a semester of teaching so that you can just solely focus on research, which is really nice. And then academic student employment. So this is what I've been talking about, like graduate student instructor or GSI. This is considered like an ASC appointment. So some semesters you'll be teaching, and so you'll be having an ASC appointment in order to get the funding for yourself. So that pays your salary. And then some folks, they actually receive like a fellowship upon getting admitted. And so that allows them to just focus on research and they don't have to teach during their first year typically. Then in year two, you'll be finishing your course requirements and you'll still be enrolled in Research 299. So you'll still be doing research in your lab and getting credit for it. And then at this point, you'll also start to prepare for qualifying exams. And the qualifying exam is something that we all do, and it's basically a mix of a written and oral examination that tests your knowledge and expertise in the field that you're focused in and make sure that you're making adequate progress towards your research goals. And so this is something you'll start to prepare for. It usually involves a lot of reading, of course, making sure that you're keeping up with your research and getting all the data that you need. And so, yeah, you'll start preparing for that in your second year typically. And then in year three, you're still going to be doing research. So we still have Research 299. And then hopefully you'll advance to candidacy at this point. So what this means is you have passed your qualifying exam, hopefully, at your third year. And so once you pass your qualifying exam, you go from a PhD student to a PhD candidate. And basically, this tells us that, okay, they have the knowledge, they're making adequate progress that they need to be making. And so you advance to candidacy. You'll also start forming your dissertation committee. So these are the folks that will help guide you and that will review your dissertation. And these are typically professors and your advisor that have relevant knowledge and that are experts in the field that you're focusing on with your research. And you'll also start preparing your dissertation proposal. Year four. So clinical students during the first few years, they're balancing research but also clinical experience. So for them, they're usually preparing for and taking qualifying exams at their fourth year, so a little bit later. And then here you'll also be working on your dissertation proposal some more, and you'll still be doing research in your lab and getting credit through that through Research 299. And then years five and six, you'll hopefully be writing up your dissertation, getting ready to submit that, and getting ready to graduate. You'll still be doing research. The Research 299 is still here. And then at this point, this is when clinical students also go on to internship. So this is in general what the 5 to 6 year PhD looks like.
Mhm.
All right, passing it on to Kai.
Yay. Thank you, Sabana. So basically, with our timeline, you are in the right place if you are interested in applying to our program. Summer is when we typically host the most summer information sessions. At a minimum, we have one. So thank you for being here at our one for now. Um, we also put a lot of announcements out about either holding like an office hour or doing another kind of event like this that's virtual so that folks can join us from anywhere around the world and kind of interface with folks that are working in the department or are students in the department. But this is also prime time if you are interested in applying to our program for this cycle, that you are gathering your unofficial transcripts. We don't require official transcripts until you are admitted into the program. This is a time when you should be talking to your potential letter of recommendation writers. I will say for all 30 of you, or well, some of us are not applying. And that's because we work here or are here at Berkeley as a PhD student. But this is the time when you should be collecting your letters of rec and really drafting your personal history statement and a statement of purpose. Information about all of that is found on our admissions webpage, probably where you found information about this info session on our website. For fall 2026, I have a little bit of an announcement for everyone. So our application is actually going to be due on November 16th this year. That was actually our application deadline last year as well. I just submitted that on Monday to the graduate division. So November 16th is our deadline for a fall 2027 start. But please continue to check our general admissions webpage for updates because what's to come is which faculty members are actually going to be accepting students for this upcoming cycle. And then in spring 2027, that is when we hold our interviews. Um, Interview invitations actually go out at the end of December and are typically held in January, whether they are in person or virtual, depends on the research area that you are applying to. And then decisions are due from those that are accepted to our program April 15th. So that is the whole lifetime of the admission cycle for our program.
All right. So coursework requirements. So there's no set number of courses and there's no list of required courses that you need in order to apply to the program. But preference is given to folks who have taken introductory psychology and also research methods and statistics. So, by taking these courses, it shows that you have a general background in psychology, which is important for applying to a psychology program. And this is also a research-focused program, so it's important for you to already have a little bit of background in research methods and statistics since you'll be collecting data and you need to analyze it. So that's very helpful. Again, these courses aren't required, but we highly, highly recommend that you take them so you can be a competitive candidate. And then it's also helpful to take some advanced coursework in the area that you're applying to. So Kai mentioned those 6 areas. So depending on which area you're interested in, you'll want to take some advanced coursework in those areas so you can be a competitive candidate. So for example, if you're interested in cognitive neuroscience or cognition, it would be useful to take a course such as cognitive modeling. If you're interested in clinical science, it would be helpful to take a course such as psychopathology. And if you're interested in social personality, then it would be helpful to take a course such as emotional regulation. And again, none of these courses are strictly required, but we highly recommend them to make yourself a competitive candidate. And for degree requirements, it's not required that you have a bachelor's or a master's in psychology in order to be admitted into the program. We have a lot of successful candidates that have degrees in other areas. For example, we have students apply with degrees in biological, cognitive, or social science areas that are closely related to areas of psychology in our graduate program. If you have a degree in an area that's completely unrelated to psychology, it would be really helpful for you to take some coursework, such as the ones that we talked about on the previous slide, to make yourself a more competitive candidate. But again, not required for you to go get a whole nother bachelor's in psychology since that's not required for admission. One thing to note is that we don't offer a terminal master's degree, so we only have a PhD program. However, if you're admitted as a PhD student, you do have the option to get a master's along the way. It's optional for all students except for folks in the clinical science area. Those students are required to obtain the master's along the way to their PhD. But just note, we don't have a formal master's program. But if you're admitted to the PhD program and you want your master's, it's a short application and you submit something with that, you get your master's and then you continue on to your PhD.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right. So for filling out the application, something that I really want to emphasize for folks, this is kind of like we're unpacking the like hidden curriculum a little bit. When you're applying to a PhD program, you're not just applying to the program, you're applying specifically to work with a faculty member who would be your advisor. So really prioritize the faculty advisor that you want to apply with. Um, so for my example here, if you're interested in clinical science as your primary research area to focus on, and you want to really work with Dr. Brooks Stevens, you would put Jasmine Brooks Stevens in the application under clinical science. Some folks really want to work with specific professors, but then they end up putting the wrong research area. I don't want anyone in this room to have their application looked over because they put the right professor and the wrong research area. So make sure that that is um, really solid in your application, that you're making that very clear. For and in our application, you're required to put at least 3 faculty that you would want to work with. Um, And so when you're inputting your secondary faculty and maybe they're in a different research area, um, you maybe want to study developmental secondarily. So then you would choose your faculty. For this example, I chose Celeste Kidd in developmental. And so that's how you would input your faculty advisor and the research area into your application. And this happens to a lot of people. Their application does get passed over because faculty are just a little confused. The admissions committees are confused. They're like, oh, this person wants to study cognitive neuroscience, but they put someone in social personality as their faculty advisor. What was the disconnect? So I don't want that to happen to any of you. The next thing I'm going to talk about is funding. There are some really wonderful resources that I am going to put in the chat for you all. The first one is actually from the graduate division. So UC Berkeley's graduate division has a graduate fellowships, grants, and awards page that has up-to-date information about funding opportunities that you can apply to prior to starting your PhD journey. And some of these resources are within UC Berkeley, within the UC system, and some of them are external to the UC in general. Another really helpful funding tool that is not owned by Berkeley, but is actually UCLA's. It's called GRAPES. Uh, don't ask me what that stands for because I don't know, but it is a database that helps you filter through any requirements that certain funding opportunities are looking for. So you can filter by eligibility, citizenship status, how much amount of money that you're looking to apply for. So that those are two really solid options that you have links to in the chat. And then if and when you do end up getting the interview for anywhere that you're applying to, uh, really make sure that you're having that funding conversation with your faculty advisor or faculty mentor, if given the opportunity, because they want to make sure that they are funding the research that you want to do and that it's in alignment with the work that they're doing in their lab. Um, yeah, make sure you have that conversation. I know for folks it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but it is necessary because it's just kind of the landscape that we're working with, especially at a public university like UC Berkeley. And also know that Student Services, my office, shares funding opportunities to our current graduate students. So once, coming into the program, we're constantly updating our current graduate students on what job opportunities there are, what scholarships and fellowships to apply to, as best as we can. So we we take care of our students not only academically, but also when it comes to the funding piece and more things holistically. So the next thing that we want to talk about is being a competitive candidate itself. And there are a couple of things that we want you all to consider, right? So several students do apply to our program more than once. I would say on average, students are applying to our program two, maybe even three times. And if you don't get in the first time, we really do recommend that folks get more research and lab experience if possible. Um, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that really looks like. Um, but another thing to consider is, if you are applying to this program or other psychology PhD programs, and you just feel like you need a little bit more pedagogical knowledge on the field of psychology, you can definitely look into a post-baccalaureate certificate program. And I'm not saying that you have to go to ours, but ours is pretty great. So I'm going to plug it into the chat. That's the psychology post-bac program here at UC Berkeley. It is offered through the UC Berkeley Extension. Um, or if you're looking into going into work, we really recommend, looking into research assistant positions. A lot of folks that transition from work into being a PhD student, they're also lab managers. Um, and moving past that, when it comes to developing your research interests, there are definitely roles that you can look into that would really help facilitate the growth of your research interests. So again, looking at roles that would benefit you, like clinical research coordinator roles, part-time and full-time lab assistant, lab manager roles, even if they're not in psychology, even in related fields like public health, neurology, vision science, having that lab research experience is really like a high priority for a lot of admissions committees. Um, aligning research, aligning the research that you want to do to the research being conducted by current faculty. This is really important because while yes, we do have our own interests, and things that we want to study, there there should just be alignment with what the faculty is also researching. And so having that conversation as well is really important with your potential faculty advisors. Um, and then something that we also want to have you all consider when it comes to reaching out to faculty and current graduate students. So you definitely can, but what we always say in our emails to students that ask if this is okay, you may not be guaranteed a response from faculty, especially during the summer, because this is their off time. Um, they get a large volume of emails, and so uh, yeah, a response may not be guaranteed. Some current graduate students are really open to having conversations with prospective students, but it's PhD students are busy. And so, yes, you can absolutely reach out, but a response is not always guaranteed. So, those are all the different things that we want you all to consider in a very transparent, straightforward way.
All right. And then here's some inside scoop into like, these are the experiences of current graduate students. So each bullet is one student, and these are the experiences that they had prior to applying to our PhD program here at UC Berkeley. So this first student, developmental, this is me. So this is all the experience that I included on my CV when I applied, the things that I talked about during interviews, the things I wrote about in my statements. So just to give you an idea, if you're interested in developmental psychology, some background also, the person I work with Dr. Jan Engelman. So he does developmental research, but also comparative research. So he also works with chimpanzees, which is why I also have some relevant animal experience, which goes back to what Kai was saying about making sure that your interests align with the faculty that you're going to be working with. So for me, when I applied, I had received my bachelor's in psychology from NYU. I got an animal behavior and conservation certificate that took me 1 year at Hunter College. I was a caseworker for 1 year, so I was working with families and kids. I also had various research experiences with different animal species and also with kids for 2.5 years in different labs. I worked at the San Francisco SFPC, oh my goodness, the San Francisco SPCA as a client experience specialist for about 6 months. I was a teaching assistant for a year and also a prison education volunteer for 3 years. So all of that experience made me a strong candidate for the developmental program and especially to work with someone like Jan Engelman who also works with animals. Here we have the experience of a clinical student who applied to our program and got in, and she is going on to her internship now. She's going to be at Stanford, so that's exciting. So when she applied, she had earned her bachelor's in psychology and a minor in Spanish and education. She's a part-time RA for 1.5 years. She was a psych peer advisor for 2 years, a moderator for a peer support mobile mental health startup for 2 years, an undergraduate counselor for a summer ADHD treatment program for 2 summers, a student assistant specialist for a community mental health program for a year, and also a research coordinator for 1.5 years. So you can see here, specifically for clinical students, she has a mix of both research experience and clinical experience with different populations. So that made her a really strong candidate for the clinical program here at Berkeley. And then lastly, here's an example of a social personality student. She earned her bachelor's of science in psychology. She was also a McNair scholar. She had 2 years of undergraduate research experience. She completed an independent research project. She was a teaching assistant for 1 year, and she also completed a summer undergraduate research fellowship. So, as you can see, like we've emphasized already, our program is really focused on research. So, all of us, you can see, have a lot of research experience. And then we also have those specific experiences that are important based on our research interests. Okay, so now we're going to open the floor to questions. I think we'll answer questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute, feel free to do so.
And I'll stop recording as well.